Welcome back to Cape Ann today, folks. Heather and I are joined by Ruth Pereen. She is the chair for the Essex Board of Selectmen. How are you, Ruth? Good to see you again.
I'm good. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Okay, right off the top, we see all the construction happening on the Causeway Bridge. What is the latest there?
So the Causeway Bridge, Route 133 is a state highway. So that is a state project. That is not a town project. Of course, we are in the know. We know a little bit. Well, we know a lot, but they mobilized in December of 2021. The project is being headed up by a company called MAS Bridge Construction. They've been fabulous to work with. They mobilized beginning of December. The anticipated date of the temporary bridge will be completion March of 22. So honestly, just a month away. And then they'll start the major repairs on the permanent bridge. The state permit allows them to work until June of 2024. And MAS does feel strongly that they should be wrapped up and complete before that. The engineer did say to us that given COVID and supply chain issues, that they want to make sure that they keep that time frame just in case something falls behind. But we're excited. We want to, get it open as fast as we can so that we get our trucks to our restaurants and we don't hold up anything here in town.
Yeah, right. Like right off the bat, those restaurants came to mind. What's the response been from that business sector down there regarding the repairs?
It's a necessary evil. I think everyone is stressed out with how it's going to affect them. The state did a great job making sure that the temporary bridge can take the size of our fire trucks so that if we have a real actual emergencies on either side of town, the fire trucks can get across the temporary bridge. There is concern that the big, huge tractor trailers cannot. So we met with the Essex Merchants Group, the Chamber of Commerce back at the Rivers Bend in September of 21. And we told them just to warn their vendors that, the big trucks may have to find alternate routes, whether it come in Southern Ave off 128 or Route 22. So they were going to put together a flyer, get that out to their vendors and try to make it work. So I'm sure they did that.
Gotcha. And so while we're on the subject, do you want to explain how Apple Street is going to continue to be used?
Sure. So Apple Street, I actually took notes on that because that's always a big question. And it's kind of a really important street for us here in Essex. The town continues to tackle the issue of keeping Apple Street open. That is our alternate route. It's our emergency route. So when the causeway floods, which as we know it does it more often with climate change, and we had that major event back in 2018, the big storm that closed it down for quite a long time. So we end up using Apple Street as the emergency route. If we can't use that, if it goes underwater, we have to use Route 128, go all the way down Southern in Manchester, and then take it all the way to Beverly to get to the other side of Essex. Clearly, it's not convenient, and there's emergency issues that go with that. So to study the issue, to prepare for the eventual roadbed elevation and culvert, we have been working for different grants to help pay for that, to elevate the two dips in the Southern Ave end of Apple Street to keep those open. And it looks like one of the grants that we have applied for and will apply for in the future will help with a large portion of the funding for that.
So what is the response on Apple Street to this work, Ruth?
I have to say that it's been discussed in our meetings, and sadly, a lot of residents don't attend the meetings. So we don't find residents come out and voice their concerns until permits have been pulled or after the fact, which is unfortunate. I've only heard from one resident that lives on Apple Street that said, how is this going to impact us? The truth is right now, we don't know. I don't know that it's going to impact them any differently than traffic does currently. It is one of the 3 scenic ways that we have here in the town of Essex. So we can't widen the road. We're not going to be able to make any sort of changes in the sense that the road will not become a throughway. It won't become a highway. It won't get any wider. The only real goal is to elevate the 2 dips so that they don't flood and end up underwater. Yes, during a storm when the causeway is flooded, you will have increased traffic, but I don't know that having that happen 3 or 4 times a year is an inconvenience to anybody when it comes to getting through town. So sometimes people have to deal with things they don't love. That's all you can do.
Well, you are such a tiny town and you have a really big climate change issue. getting back to the bridge, the causeway, all this flooding. So can you just sketch out kind of generally, what does the Board of Selectmen, how are they thinking about this? You know, policy, actions, you know, intersection with the state. What are you thinking?
So, I mean, we're always thinking about climate change. We're always applying for grant funding. We're always thinking about what to do being on, you know, such a small coastal town. I can't say that we've talked about policy at this point and how that will affect us, but we take projects as they come and apply for every grant we can. For instance, we're doing the Canoma Point seawall project right now. One of the reasons we had to do that project, and it's a huge undertaking, that should be complete by May of this year, which is amazing to see if anybody wants to drive down to Canoma Point. But one of the reasons we did that, once again, the big storm of 2018, we ended up with a huge storm surge. It ruined a good section of wall. We had to do an emergency repair, which was not a permanent repair. It was just an emergency repair. And now we're actually fixing it the right way. So it's not a long-term solution to climate change, but we kind of, being a little town, unfortunately, a lot of times we find ourselves reactive instead of proactive, which isn't always the best way. But we deal with it because we don't always have the funding source or the ability to deal with it in such a timely fashion. We do plan, but it doesn't always work out that way. One of the other things, which is not exactly climate change, but it does tie into it a little bit because it's something that we do deal with every 20 or 30 years, is the dredging. I don't know if you guys heard the amazing news that we got the $4.4 million for the maintenance dredging of the Essex River all the way out to the Ipswich Bay. So we're extremely excited, and it does tie into climate change, because if it weren't for climate change and the way that, you know, the water moves, we wouldn't be dealing with all of this need for dredging. But we do every 20 or 30 years, we deal with it, and it's something that we forecast into our, you know, kind of our future. So that's exciting as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to just talk about the impact of that dredging on the community and the boating community in particular?
So I'm one of the newer selectmen. So I wasn't around 20 years ago when we did, or whatever it was, 17 years ago when we did the last dredging. My understanding is the project went very well. I think it's going to be, I think it's a split. It's a 50-50. I think a lot of our residents that are passionate about the environment are not so thrilled about the dredging process. They'd like to just see the river be natural, because dredging the river is going to bring in more tourism. It's going to bring in more pleasure crafts. It's going to bring in people throwing wakes. So I think that they don't love that. So it's a 50-50 split, but I think it's good for the businesses. I mean, it would be great for our 3 marinas. They'll be able to bring more business in. It's good for the town. It brings us some tourism. They eat at our restaurants. So economically speaking, I think it's great. I think it's going to be an inconvenience like anything else. It's a project. It's going to clog up our river. What are you going to do? You deal with it, because it's going to be good for the next 20 years.
Right.
And the funny thing is, my first thought was, well, it brings in more water. There'll be more water.
Right, but if the sand isn't so high, maybe the water doesn't go so high.
Right, that's true. Right. We'll have to ask the Army Corps of Engineers that question.
Exactly.
So Ruth, shifting gears, it is budget season once again. What are some of those big ticket items that the town is dealing with?
Well, in any budget season, as you probably know, the school is our biggest budget item. It consumes about 50% of our budget. It's always a point of contention when it comes to how are we going to spend those funds. We have an amazing group of elected officials on our school committee that, you know, they are fiscally responsible. They're doing the best they can to balance level services with a balanced budget. It's been a difficult year. COVID really has, you know, I always hate using COVID as an excuse, but COVID really has thrown a wrench into the budget across all areas and every department. We as a town have been asking all of our departments to level fund for the last 3 budget seasons. They've done a great job. So obviously, other than contractual expenses, they've done a really awesome job. Our finance committee has done a great job helping them keep those, you know, level funded and deal with the areas as we see fit. But the school's a tough one because it does consume almost 50% of our overall budget, and it raises a lot of questions and concerns. But if we're going to educate our children in our 2 communities with our, you know, partnering community of Manchester, then we need to fund the school budget. And again, they're not looking to increase their FTEs. They're not looking for any sort of outrageous new things, nothing shiny and new. They're just looking to keep level services for our children to get educated. And again, the administration there has done an amazing job building the new memorial school, which is up and operational and loving it. And we actually have a walkthrough at Essex Elementary School on February 8th at 4 o'clock. So the school committee will be doing a walkthrough to do an analysis of what that building looks like and what the next steps will be for either renovation or replacement of Essex Elementary.
Nice.
So Ruth, the town has been working with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to analyze your current zoning bylaws. Do you want to talk about what's at stake here?
So, sure, I would love to. We don't exactly know how that's going to unfold. As you know, we have a 2-year moratorium on change of use from residential to commercial. And it was simply to take on the idea of looking at our bylaws and looking at our zoning. This creeps up every few years, and it's not always a popular topic. But as things change and new people move to town and new businesses come to town, we've had a lot more pushback from people saying, this is my biggest investment. I want it protected. The lack of zoning, we do have some zoning. There's a misunderstanding that we have no zoning. We do have some zoning, but it's not a traditional zoning district like most towns. And so the Board of Selectmen said, you know what, let's go for a moratorium. Let's really evaluate this, which is what we've been doing through a grant with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. They've been amazing. We got our first $45,000 grant. I just want to make sure. Yeah, we got a community compact cabinet grant in the amount of $45,000. That was to retain the services of MAPC. We will be applying for a $75,000 grant. Actually, we're going to be applying for that now for in any other additional state grant funding, hoping to bring some recommendations to the annual town meeting of 23, potentially fall town meeting of 23. We're not exactly sure how that grant funding is going to work out. And the goal is, we don't know the answer. So whether it's just going to be looking at the bylaws and altering those to get a little stronger in language so that we have more protections for our residents, or if it's going to be true zoning overlay districts or zoning in general, traditional zoning. We don't know how that's going to look. But since we're on that subject, we have I'm reading because I don't want to miss anything. It's a virtual community forum to talk about the future zoning of Essex. It's going to be Tuesday, February 15th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. and it's a Zoom meeting. So that Zoom link is available on the Essex homepage at essexma.org. It's available under, I believe, the Planning Board tab. It's going to be available on the Economic Development Committees tab. It's available on Facebook on the town clerk's page. It's been shared on the police department page. It was shared on Essex Notices and Issues, the moms and dads page. So we are doing our best to get it out to the community. A flyer has been printed and brought to the senior center for the seniors that don't necessarily have access to the internet or wouldn't think to go look for this link. So we are really, really doing our best to reach out to the community and say, what do you want to see? What do we want Essex to look like? How do we want to protect it? What do we want to bring in the future? So so that's the goal with the MAPC project.
And then I guess looking towards April's town meeting, do you want to touch upon the Affordable Housing Trust at all?
Sure. We've been meeting with the Housing Coalition. So we've been meeting about once a month with Dana Lewinter and our own town planner, Dana Menon. They've been very instrumental in trying to craft what an affordable housing trust might look like. We don't have that really ironed out and fine-tuned yet. We're meeting on that. We talk about it at each selectmen's meeting to see what we could bring to annual town meeting. The goal would be to set up a trust that would oversee funds, whether they were from community preservation funds or donations to the trust, but it would allow us the ability to make quicker decisions than having to wait for an annual town meeting or a special fall town meeting if we had the opportunity to buy something. What towns find, and this is a general statement, not necessarily applying to Essex, but what towns find is that when there's an opportunity afforded to them, they may miss that opportunity because there's no money to back it up. They don't have the ability to go, say, buy a multifamily project or a multifamily home or renovate a project because they have to wait for the vote of town meeting to get those funds. So this would set something up. There would be, right now, the conversation is somewhere between 5 and 9 members of the community that would be part of the trust that would have the oversight to how those funds would be spent. So all the details are not ironed out yet, but that's the goal.
So, and the point is to be more facile with creating affordable housing, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And what are the numbers for affordable housing in Essex? Like what's your stock?
Sure. So we're at 2.7%. Safe haven is obviously 10%. And the only affordable housing stock that we have here as inventory in Essex is Chabaco Terrace, which is what people refer to as our old age homes or elderly housing. So that's up just off Winthrop Street and on Eisenhower Way. And I want to say there are 40 units up there, but the percent is 2.7%.
So it's a concern.
It's a concern. It really is. I mean, we have some safeguards in place, which, you'll hear people say, well, we don't really have any more buildable lots, or we're limited by way of sewer capacity, or, a lot of our area is either granite or clay, so it's not going to perk. But, I say where there's a will, there's a way. And the deeper your pockets, the bigger the complex. So
Right.
I would love us as a community to want to embrace the idea of affordable housing, to be more inclusive so that we have anybody that can come to Essex and afford to live here and be part of an amazing community, versus having a 40B come to town. And the next thing you know, we end up with 154 units that no one saw coming. So I think if we're, once again, let's be proactive instead of reactive. Let's start doing this. It will be a slow process. We're not a big town. We don't have the big dollars behind us. But if we can do 1 unit at a time, or a multifamily 2 or 3 units, that would be great. So you got to start somewhere.
Gotcha.
Right.
And lastly, Ruth, is there anything else that you want to relay to us while we have you? It's been a while.
It has been a while. So I can give you some quick little highlights, a little
Sure.
Yeah.
notes that I took.
Yeah.
So the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we applied with our community partner Manchester for the LRRP grant, which is the Local Rapid Recovery, which we did get as a joint grant. They've worked diligently with a company to talk about things that would benefit both towns. So some of the ideas they came up with was placemaking, signage, lighting along the causeway. And the way this grant works is, because we're partnering with Manchester, it has to be things that would work in both communities. So we're passionate about the causeway lighting. We've wanted that for a long time, but it's an expensive project. So we're going to start applying through our new town planner. We're going to apply for grants that are going to do that for us. And then the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce was extremely instrumental in being the liaison, or the grant maker for the Cape Ann comeback. And they did get that grant, where they've also worked on many different ideas. One of their biggest ones was Blue Dot, which is an online marketing advertising platform. I'm hoping I'm saying that right, where any business, you do not have to be a member of the Essex Merchants Group or the Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce, but you can go on to Blue Dot, you can register your company, and then when local people, or they don't even have to be local, but they want to go find a particular type of business, they can search it many different ways in this database, so that it helps get your business information out there.
Yeah,
so
it's like a supersized directory.
Exactly, supersized directory. That's a great way to put it. Town facilities, our new police and fire station at 11 John Wise Ave is up and operational. The police and fire people are extremely happy to be in a new building. It's been very functional. We had our first spaghetti supper there back in November, which was very successful. We are going to be having our voting there, so we're excited about that. 24 Martin Street, which was the site of our old police and fire station, has been demolished. They are under the site restoration process now, so it has been removed, it's been leveled, there's still fencing around it. The conditions make it difficult to work, so we will be getting granite curbing and sidewalks and parking, so that's exciting. Let's see, the Folsom Pavilion sadly had to come down at Centennial Grove in 2021. The engineers found that to be not structurally sound, so they removed that, but we do have a group of volunteers that are going to try to do kind of an old-fashioned barn raising. One of our local company owners, Dan Mayer, has committed to donating all the lumber. And then we have another group that's looking at paying for design, and they want to do a nice new pavilion up there. And there may be some town funds used, but limited. potentially for some of the joinery and some of the design aspects of it, but the lumber will all be donated. Let's see. We did do, we have the ongoing management of environmental issues at Chabaco Lake. So we had a group of volunteers that were able to clear out the Alewife Brook down at the end of Apple Street. That was a big undertaking. I don't know if anyone drove by there, but we had kids in there clearing it under the supervision of one of the Mass DEP people, making sure that only proper things were being removed and taken off site. We're going to be looking for future grant funding to continue additional design and permitting work that will basically do a larger portion all the way out to Chabaco Lake itself to keep that clear in the future. I mentioned the $1.7 million state grant for the replacement of the Canomo Point seawall. That was pretty awesome.
There's a lot going on in Essex, Ruth.
We do. For such a little town, we have a lot going on.
So, hey, do those
notes.
alewife run in the spring? It's through there?
I do not know. That's a Selectman Fippen question.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about that.
Aging Mr. Fippen. Yeah.
You definitely need Selectman Fippen. And honestly, he would be the best to talk about climate change and the seawall and the Alewife Brook, because I spearhead a lot of the projects. I'm on all the construction calls, but when it comes to the climate change and, the other stuff, we definitely put Peter on those. He's much more knowledgeable than I.
It's the very next thing I do is email Peter. Watch out.
Yeah, well, Ruth, this was great. It was great catching up with you. I'm glad you're feeling better. Let's do this more often. And once we start taking our show live again, we'd love for you to join us somewhere in Essex. So we got to get over there sooner than later. We miss it.
Yeah.
Well, we did get the grant. We got the grant for the 1623 studios to do the live filming of the Selectmen's meetings on the third floor of Town Hall. So that should be starting up pretty soon. Very excited about that.
Yes.
I don't know whether we'll see you guys at any of those recordings or not, but that will be happening through 1623 studios.
Beautiful.
You just might see us. We pop up in a lot of places.
Thanks again for your time, Ruth. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
So much happening in Essex. It's great.
This episode of Cape Ann Today is brought to you by J&L Welding.
Interested in a sponsorship? Email sponsor@1623studios.org to learn more.